Welcome to the Diverse Minds podcast, where we give you the tips, tools, and techniques you need to be a mentally healthy and inclusive leader. Each week, you'll hear about a variety of topics linked to mental health, well-being, and diversity that will enhance both your professional practice and personal well-being.
Welcome to the 128th episode of the award-winning Diverse Minds podcast. And this month's theme is all about giving and sharing. So on today's episode, I'm going to be talking about reciprocity in mentoring relationships, particularly reciprocal mentoring programs. So mentoring's gained quite a lot of popularity over the last year. I think it's seen what we could call a resurgence, especially in relation to race and understanding the experiences of global majority Black diaspora communities. Mentoring could take place in a formal or informal way, inside of the workplace, outside of the workplace. It could be based on careers or any aspect of understanding identity, disadvantage, people wanting to progress their careers. And there is a difference between mentoring, sponsorship, and coaching. And often these words are conflated. I've been running a program recently where the delegates have seemed very, very confused about coaching. It's a coaching program and really wanting more of a mentoring approach. So let's clarify the difference. So mentors have mentees. And a mentor could be anyone in a position with experience desired by a mentee who can offer advice and support. And this is particularly key in mentoring relationships where it's about career trajectory, growth, and the direction people want to go to in their careers. And I'm going to talk about then the slight difference with reciprocal mentoring. But if we take mentoring as a whole, mentors support mentees through formal or informal discussions about how to build skills, qualities, and confidence for career advancement. Mentors will often help mentees by sharing their own hurdles, and mentors give mentees suggestions on how to expand their network, learn from their mistakes, and it's a very kind of advisory feel to it. So what about coaching then? How is that different? So coaches have coachees, and trained coaches do not have to be an expert or more senior or have any certain level in their coachee's area of work. Coaching is about asking those powerful questions to enable coachees to discover the answers themselves. And coaching is always centered on a conversation. Ideally, coaches are trained in a variety of coaching models to support their particular coachee. And you get lots of different types of coaching. So there's life coaching, there's career coaching, there's coaching we think of in football or sports. So the word coaching can be quite broad. And then what about sponsorship then? Well, sponsorship have protégés, which can be quite an uncomfortable word. And a sponsor is a senior staff member invested in their protégé's career success. So the kind of traditional side of this could be the old boys network. But if we think about this more positively and thinking about it as a form of allyship and opening doors to people, sponsors really help drive their protégés' career vision. And sponsors give protégés their active network connections and make new connections for them. And sponsors are personally vested in the upward movement of their protégé. So it has some kind of benefit for them because they will sponsor their protégés' visibility, often using their own platforms and reputation as a medium for exposure. So what are the common areas of all three? Because yes, they are different, but there are areas of overlap, as you've probably picked up on as I've been reading out. So it is about all three of them creating a safe space for a powerful conversation. It is about active and attentive listening, providing reflective insights with the aim of personal development, reframing perspectives, our own and that of our mentor, coachee, or protégé, decluttering from our own lens and not thinking that we know it all, but also identifying quick wins and opportunities for the individual that we're working with. So mentoring could be thought of as training, motivation, advice, helping someone achieve success, giving them direction, asking potentially challenging questions, supporting them, and focusing on the goal. And the reciprocity bit is an interesting one. So you might have heard about the iceberg of ignorance. And this was developed by consultant Sydney Yoshida in 1989. And he called it the iceberg of ignorance. And he revealed what he saw in the work and leadership habits of Japanese car manufacturer Calsonic. So he found that actually only 4% of executives saw the problems. So that's the tip of the iceberg above the water. That middle managers see around 9% of the problems. Supervisors saw 74% of the problems and frontline workers 100% of the problems. So thinking about that reciprocity in a traditional mentoring relationship where you have someone senior within a workplace mentoring someone that's more junior or on the way up the trajectory, they can really be a source of information and insight into what the organization need to do differently that the executives may not know about. And equally, someone who's not an executive can get an insight into the kinds of challenges that the executives have to deal with without knowing what's going on the front line. So that's just an example to get us thinking about reciprocity in mentoring relationships. So what then are the specific benefits of reciprocal mentoring? So this is about learning, as you heard about the up with the iceberg, learning more about the organization from the top, hearing that senior perspective or hearing the perspective you don't always get sight of, learning skills from someone, so senior to junior and junior to senior, and being both a listener and a guide, and that works both ways. And the outcomes of reciprocal mentoring programs. So this is taken from Metro Toronto. In 2018, there was an annual conference. And this is specifically, there isn't that much work I could find about reciprocal mentoring. So where you've got two people, and the idea is there may be difference in where they are in an organization, but that the relationship is reciprocal. And the way the mentoring program is set up is so that both parties can understand positioning, identity, organizational differences, depending where they are within a particular company or workplace. So this report found that actually in reciprocal mentoring, that there was higher rates of attraction, retention, and higher performers were engaged, that there was a definite upgrade in employee skills and knowledge from these conversations, that because of recognizing the power imbalances and bringing it more to a mutual platform, it fostered a collaborative environment. This, in effect, promoted diversity of thought and style and different ways of doing things. It was shown to be a great way of developing leadership talent and also a line of succession, because so often internal knowledge and knowledge transfer gets dissipated out of an organization. It created and preserved institutional memory, and it was a great way of creating inclusion. So very interesting, I think. And often with mentoring, what can happen is that people feel that they have to have all the knowledge, maybe a more senior mentor, and tell someone exactly what they have to do, without remembering that, of course, no matter what someone's grade is, they will have a level of knowledge and understanding. And giving and receiving comes in many different forms in terms of reciprocity in the workplace. It doesn't have to be, this could be considered a voluntary program. And it's important to recognize this, I think. So what can be the barriers to reciprocity in mentoring programs? I think you do have to acknowledge the context of the organization and what's happening, because what can happen is now, particularly in reciprocal mentoring programs based on race, so where there's one person from a global majority Black diaspora background and another mentor from a white majority background, and the idea is to understand the experiences of being someone from a global majority Black diaspora background. That person who is from an, if I can just use the term, underrepresented group, racially underrepresented group, can feel very put upon, and they can also feel that the onus is on them to educate the white majority person, particularly if that person is in a senior role as well, even though it's meant to be a reciprocal program. So the question there is, can it ever really be reciprocal when we know in society this hierarchy exists, and there's also could be a power imbalance in the organization? So there's a lot of work that you have to do in terms of training and setting up a program to make sure that people really feel that it's truly reciprocal and they're not going to be done onto, or their private is going to be pushed into the public, and that the information will be used against them. And this is particularly acute in organizations where there is a gossip culture, where you say one thing and then within a second the whole organization seems to know about it. And I often get questions about, how do we really know it will be confidential? And I think if you're in a place where that's going to be very tricky for your workplace, is to think again about what other scheme or initiative could you use to get to the point where trust can be built to create a confidential environment for this. So I really hope you're enjoying the content and want to keep up to date. Then you can join my newsletter. If you join my mailing list, you'll receive a free copy of my ebook, The Mentally Healthy Leading Manager. And the link is in the show notes, but just in case, it is bit.ly/MHLMEBK21. Okay, so let's carry on thinking about reciprocal mentoring and setting up a program. It's really important, particularly if it's based on identity. I've given the example of race, but it could be around a lived experience of recovery from mental ill health, from workplace stress. It could be LGBTQIA plus mentoring. It could be around gender and gender identity, understanding the barriers that carers in the workplace face. It could be around understanding reciprocal in terms of junior level, senior level in an organization. So whatever the strand is of reciprocal mentoring, it is very important to make sure that you have the training. So training for the majority or the mentors that have more power in an organization, and underrepresented, or mentors that have less representation or support or less power or influence. They're seen to have less power and influence in an organization. It's quite tricky kind of trying to summarize this. And I would say make sure you have two separate training sessions so that groups can talk freely and talk about what they're fearful of and what the challenges might be. And then have another session where you bring them together so they can have a little meet and greet before the actual mentoring starts. I would also suggest considering contracting arrangements and how, you need to give people a framework of how they want to work together, what might be useful to them, so they have a starting point. And one organization that I worked for, they created some questions that you might want to ask at the start of a mentoring relationship, in the middle, and at the end, that again gave people frameworks so that there wasn't this stress around putting private into public. And mentoring doesn't just have to be a conversation. So there are lots of practical things you can do within a mentoring relationship to build that reciprocity. So some examples, career mapping, thinking about your career trajectory to date and what you'd like to do differently and where you want to go. Thinking about that 5 years ahead. Also joint values mapping. So thinking about your values, their values, and talking about those and where your values have come from. And I think that's a really lovely way to build trust and not necessarily put all of your private into the public. And values can be related to your career and what you do, which can make people feel safer in talking about that. Asking for introductions to people that you want to talk to in the business. Also encouraging and supporting, if it's around careers, that your mentor to apply for those new jobs or roles. Thinking about shadowing opportunities, meeting staff networks, basically access to spaces that people don't necessarily have. It could also be things around visibility, talking about confidence, very practical things like reviewing application CVs and cover letters. And this will depend on the kind of mentoring program that it is. Talking about how systems and processes work, and that can work senior to junior, junior to senior, across the board. If you work in different bits of a business, really, really useful. And thinking about what visibility looks like to both people. And particularly if you identify as being from if it's a program that's reciprocal, but it's based on underrepresentation or something that needs to be addressed. Key part of this will be telling your story. And this isn't always easy. And some people find this a lot simpler to do than others. So in order to tell your story in the context of your journey, where you want to go, it's really key that you use those I statements and own it. So those personal I statements, how things have made you feel, what you think, and really show how your values feed into that. You might want to explain your journey and history related to your career, and that could link in with the career mapping. Sometimes metaphors and analogies really help people to get deeper understanding. And in terms of that reciprocity, if you share something, that other person can share something too. And they might be in a majority group, but really it's about clicking onto that human experience. And someone is likely to experience something that may be able to help them resonate, not completely understand, but resonate with what you're saying. It is about both parties appealing to emotion and making that genuine connection, and sharing barriers that you have faced and how you have jumped over those hurdles or how you've navigated those, and what support would have empowered you further. And that's the change bit, because if it's happening in a workplace, you do want change to take place for the better. And how can this help them? That reciprocity, how can that gain help them gain insight for the better of an organization, particularly if they're senior. And also, if it's happening in the workplace, referring back to the statistics, aims, and missions of an organization to gain that buy-in. And things that might come up in the mentoring process, in reciprocal mentoring. It could be about risks that someone needs to take, anyone, and talking through those, opportunities they need to seize, connections they'd like to make or you think they need to make, talking about the battles that are worth fighting and those that can be ignored. And this could be within the workplace or outside of it. Kind of allies and sponsors and connections they need to make. So even though this isn't sponsorship, you could talk about and explore what sponsorship might look like. The image brand of themselves they want to promote. And this isn't about being fake and creating something fake, but it's really about this two-way feedback process. And I also just wanted to think about some techniques that you also might like to consider. So we talked about conversation, but within that conversation, what you could do. So initially at the start of a program, it's really useful that you use some kind of icebreakers, what you might like to do, which is when I say, if you create a program, you want to have separate training sessions and then bring people together, be really clear about the expectations. And probably if you're the facilitator or the organizer of a program, have midpoint check-ins. And think about activities that are fun and creative. It doesn't always have to be, get your laptop out and take notes. It could be drawing. It could be a collage. It could be that you both create a vision board and talk through your vision boards. I think that's a very powerful exercise. It could be about word storming. So you could just start with a word in the middle and then come off words of the side of it. So, career or the organization's name. If you like to try things like visioning, kind of do visioning for each other. Free form writing, set a timer, write about a particular topic and share what you've written. Most people absolutely hate role plays, but when I say role plays, if someone's having a challenging time with a manager or there's something they want to explore, they want to rehearse for a meeting or a presentation, that's what I mean about role plays, giving someone the chance to play out a scenario in a safe environment. Flow charts, walking and talking. Mentoring doesn't have to be, maybe it does have to be in front of a screen these days, but if you are meeting face to face, you can have walk and talk meetings. It's really lovely to be out in the fresh air. People feel that they can open up and be more honest when they're side by side quite often. And do check out my episode on listening to support someone if you want to know more about that. So many employers that I've worked with have found this has been an absolute game changer. And I'm going to include some links, but two organizations I've worked with, Liverpool John Moores University, they run a reciprocal mentoring program based on race, where students, Black, global majority and diaspora community students mentor very senior staff. And they've put together some great resources that I'm always signposting people to. Also City University, they had global majority Black diaspora staff reciprocal mentoring with senior members of the senior leadership team, and that they've put together some videos and how it had really enabled people to build these very special and open relationships to build that understanding. And the children's mental health charity Place to Be, and that was a really interesting one because they're much smaller than universities, but again, some really great things came out of that, some changes, some policy changes, and some career opportunity changes for global majority Black and diaspora staff. So when these programs are done well, and I know that the examples I've given are on race and there are many others, I know there've been some fantastic understanding of disability in the workplace reciprocal mentoring schemes, but a lot of thought has to go into it. So just remember that mentoring is slightly different from coaching and sponsorship. There are commonalities, but this is quite unique. As I mentioned, mentoring seems to have had a resurgence, which is great, but think about the context, what do you want to achieve, how you want to shape it, what's important, what you hope to gain. Also consider the evaluation and the metrics. So how are you going to ascertain where people were at the start of the program and where people were towards the end of the program? Think about training, those separate sessions, particularly if there's power imbalances, if there are things around identity that people need to download and talk about in a safe space before they start the mentoring program. Have a joint check-in. It doesn't have to take a long time, be really clear about the expectations, and also have midpoint check-ins to see how groups are doing. And that this should be fun. It doesn't have to be, oh God, I've got this mentoring meeting, but how can you use different techniques and tools to make it fun and come alive? And please, do remember it is that two-way process, because everyone has a powerful story to tell, and it's vital that you use your voice to tell it. But additionally, we're all here to learn and understand, and mentoring is a really great way to do that. So I really hope you've enjoyed the show. And please, if you have, write me a review on Apple or Spotify podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and can leave a review. I've popped some resources in the show notes for you. So links to the episode on listening and the links to reciprocal mentoring programs where they've really showcased through video and interviews how they've been impactful. And take care, everyone. And I'll see you in the next episode, where I'm speaking to the wonderful Shazne Spence about creating empowering beliefs. And until the next episode, we'll see you then.
Thanks for listening to the Diverse Minds podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you access your podcasts from. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Tune into next week's episode of the podcast, where I'll bring you more insights on mental health and inclusion. Bye for now.